In a world where everyone is playing to win, the true master understands that the game isn't on the board, it's in the mind of your opponent. Hello and welcome back. I want you to close your eyes for a second. I want you to imagine a carpenter. He's standing in his workshop. It's quiet. There's the smell of sawdust in the air. He's looking at a piece of oak, and he decides to fashion it into a table leg. He picks up his hammer, he picks up his chisel, and he strikes the wood. Now, here is the crucial question: does the wood strike back? Does the wood try to trick him? Does the wood wait until he's distracted and then shift its grain to ruin the cut? Of course not. The wood is passive. The environment is neutral. The carpenter is a master of his domain because the materials obey the laws of physics and nothing else. Now I want you to strip off that carpenter's apron and put on a uniform. You are now a general on a battlefield. You look across the valley at the enemy position. You decide to send a battalion to take the high ground on the left ridge. You issue the order. But unlike the wood, the enemy is watching you. They see your troops moving left. They anticipate your plan. They realize that if you take that ridge, they lose. So they don't just sit there, they move their artillery to counter you. They set a trap. They feign a retreat to lure you in. This is the fundamental difference between a neutral environment and a strategic environment. Life, unfortunately, is rarely like carpentry. Life is like war. Life is a series of decisions where the outcome doesn't just depend on what you do, it depends on what everyone else does in response to you. Today, we are going deep, and I mean really deep, into the mechanics of how we think, how we compete, and how we cooperate. We are exploring the modern classic The Art of Strategy by Nalebuff and Avinash Dixit. And the premise here is simple but earth-shattering: you are never acting in a vacuum. You are always in a game, whether you know it or not. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let's dismantle the way you make decisions. We have to start with this concept of game theory. Now I know. As soon as I say game theory, you probably picture a chalkboard full of Greek letters. Or maybe Russell Crowe in a beautiful mind writing equations on a window. And yes, there is a science to it. There are Nobel Prizes involved: Nash, Schelling, Aumann. But Nalebuff and Dixit argue that while the science provides the foundation, the application is an art. Why is it an art? Because people aren't rational robots. If everyone acted with perfect mathematical logic, the stock market would never crash and wars would never start. The art of strategy is about understanding the messy, emotional, sometimes crazy, human element. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of someone who might be trying to hurt you, or help you, and figuring out what they are going to do before they even know it themselves. Let's warm up with a story. This is a classic, and it's the perfect way to test your own strategic IQ. I want to play a game with you right now. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. You have 5 guesses to get it right. After each guess, I'll tell you higher or lower. If you get it on the first try, I give you $100. Second try, $80. It goes down by $20 each time. If you don't get it by the 5th try, you get nothing. Now pause. How do you play this? If you are thinking like a carpenter, dealing with a neutral environment, you use a binary search. You split the difference. You guess 50. If I say lower, you guess 25. If I say higher, you guess 37. Mathematically, this is the most efficient way to corner a random number. This is how a computer would do it. This is how Microsoft's Steve Ballmer used to interview people. He wanted to see if they understood the efficiency of splitting the difference. But wait. Remember the general? I am not a random number generator. I am a human being. I am your opponent. And in this game, if you win money, I lose money. I have an incentive to make sure you fail. So if I know that you are a smart, logical person, I know you're going to guess 50, then 25 or 75. I can map out your entire logic tree before you even open your mouth. So, as the strategist, what number do I pick? I pick a number that lives in the cracks of your logic. In the book, the authors admit that when they play this game, they pick the number 48. Why? Because the logical, splitting, method usually narrows the field down to the range of 42 to 50 on the last guess. The logical midpoint of that final range is 49. So the player guesses 49. And the authors sit there with a smirk, holding the number 48, and the player goes home with $0. Here's the lesson, and it's the first big takeaway of the day. You cannot just look at the board, you have to look at the player. If you play a perfect mathematical strategy against an opponent who knows that strategy, you are predictable. And if you are predictable, you are dead. This brings us to a fascinating paradox. We are obsessed with leadership in our culture. We want to be the pioneer, the innovator, the first mover. But does the first mover always win? Let's sail back to 1983. The America's Cup. Dennis Conner is skipping the U.S. boat, Liberty. He's leading 3 races to 1 against the Australian boat, Australia 2. He just needs one more win. In the 5th race, he's ahead. But the Australians have a faster boat and light winds. The Australians are desperate. They realize that if they just follow Conner, they'll lose. So, they take a crazy risk. They tack left, heading off into a weird part of the course, hoping to find a different wind pattern. Now, put yourself in Dennis Conner's shoes. You are in the lead. Do you follow them to the left? Or do you stay on your course to the right, which seems safer? Conner stayed right. He played his own game. The Australians found a lucky wind shift on the left, zoomed past him, and won the race. They went on to win the Cup, ending 132 years of American dominance. Conner was roasted by strategic experts. Why? Because of a principle called mimicry. When you are ahead, your only goal is to stay ahead. If you copy the follower's moves, if Conner had just tacked left when the Australians tacked left, he effectively neutralizes them. Even if the wind on the left was bad, they both would have slowed down, and he still would have been in front. This is the paradox. The best strategy for a leader is often to act like a follower. We see this in business all the time. Think about Apple versus Dell. For years, Apple was the pioneer, taking huge risks on new tech. Dell was the follower. They waited to see what worked, then they mass-produced it cheaper and more efficiently. Being the second mover is often more profitable because the first mover pays the tuition of failure. If you are a giant company like Procter & Gamble, you don't need to invent the next big thing. You just need to wait for a startup to invent it. Prove it works, and then you copy it or buy them. It sounds cynical, but it's strategically brilliant. So, we've talked about agility and mimicry. But let's flip the coin. Is there ever a time where being totally rigid, totally stubborn, is actually a superpower? The authors call this the power of intransigence. Imagine you are negotiating a salary. If you say, "I'd like $100,000, but I'm flexible," you have just told the opponent that you will accept less. You have given them options. But what if you say, "I need $100,000. I literally cannot accept a penny less because my mortgage requires it, and if I don't get it, I walk away." If they believe you, and that's the key, if they believe you, you have shifted the burden entirely onto them. They now have a binary choice: give you what you want, or lose you. History is full of people who wielded this power. Look at Charles de Gaulle. During World War II, he was a leader in exile. He had no army, no money, no real power. He was dependent on the British and Americans. And yet, he was a nightmare to deal with. He was arrogant, demanding, and refused to compromise on anything regarding French sovereignty. Churchill and Roosevelt were infuriated. But guess what? They caved. De Gaulle understood that his intransigence, his refusal to budge, was his only weapon. If he had been reasonable, France would have become a vassal state. By being unreasonable, he forced the Allies to treat France as a great power. But there is a dark side to this. If you are going to be stubborn, you have to be ready to crash the car. There's a tragic story about Ferdinand de Lesseps. He was the guy who built the Suez Canal. Everyone told him it was impossible. He was stubborn, he ignored the haters, and he succeeded. He became a hero. So, years later, he decides to build the Panama Canal. The conditions were totally different: mosquitoes, malaria, mountains. But de Lesseps used the same strategy: absolute stubbornness. He refused to believe the doctors about the mosquitoes. He refused to change his engineering plans. And because he couldn't turn off his intransigence, thousands of people died, investors lost everything, and the project failed. The lesson here is about the switch. Strategic stubbornness is powerful, but only if you can turn it off when you're driving off a cliff. If it's just your personality, you aren't a strategist, you're just a fool. Now let's take this idea of binding yourself a step further. We're going to talk about something that applies to every single person listening to this podcast: the problem of the future self. We all want to lose weight, save money, or learn a language. That's our present self talking. But we know that our future self is weak. The future self wants to eat the donut, buy the car, and skip the lesson. So, how do we win a game against our own future? We use strategic commitment. We burn the ships. The most famous example is the conquistador Hernán Cortés. When he landed in Mexico with 600 men to face the Aztec Empire, he knew his men were terrified. He knew that as long as the ships were sitting in the harbor, his soldiers would be thinking about retreating. So, what did he do? He burned the ships. He destroyed their exit strategy. Suddenly, the soldiers' incentives changed. They weren't fighting for conquest anymore, they were fighting for their lives. By removing the option to retreat, Cortés made his army infinitely more dangerous. You can do this in your own life. The book tells the story of a weight loss clinic where clients signed a contract. They agreed that if they didn't lose the weight, the clinic would send photos of them in a bikini to the local news station. That is burning the ships. That is changing the payoff structure of your life so that failure is simply not an option. It's terrifying, but it works. Why does it work? Because it changes the game from a maybe to a must. It signals to yourself and the world that you are locked in. But what happens when we aren't playing against ourselves, but against society? This brings us to the most famous concept in all of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. You've probably heard the classic version: two suspects, separate rooms. If they both stay silent, they get a light sentence. If one confesses and the other doesn't, the snitch goes free and the silent one gets life. If both confess, they both get 10 years. The tragedy of the prisoner's dilemma is that the smart move for the individual is the dumb move for the group. If I'm the prisoner, I'm thinking, if my partner stays silent, I should confess and go free. If my partner confesses, I must confess to avoid the life sentence. No matter what the other guy does, I am better off confessing. So we both confess. And we both get 10 years. We could have walked away with 1 year if we had just trusted each other. But we couldn't. This trap is everywhere. It's in campaign finance. Warren Buffett once proposed a brilliant solution to stop politicians from spending billions on ads. He said a billionaire should write a check for $1 billion and announce, "I will donate this money to the political party that votes most for campaign finance reform." It's genius. It creates a dilemma. If the Democrats think the Republicans are going to vote for reform, they have to vote for it too, or they lose the money. If they think the Republicans won't vote for it, they should vote for it to grab the cash. It forces everyone to cooperate on something they usually hate. It also explains why dictators stay in power. It's the belling the cat problem. All the mice agree the cat needs a bell so they can hear it coming. But who is going to put the bell on? The first mouse to try gets eaten. So, even though everyone wants the dictator gone, no one wants to be the first one to protest. Everyone waits for someone else to move, and as a result, no one moves. So, how do we break these patterns? How do we survive in a world where everyone is trying to outthink us? Sometimes, the answer is to be completely random. There is a fantastic story in the book about a Japanese CEO who needed to sell a $18 million art collection. He had to choose between Christie's and Sotheby's, the two big auction houses. He couldn't decide, so he told them, "We will play rock, paper, scissors. The winner gets the contract." This is an $18 million game of Rochambeau. Sotheby's treated it like a joke. They thought, it's just luck. They picked paper because, why not? Christie's, however, treated it like a strategic problem. They consulted the 11-year-old twin daughters of one of their directors. These kids played the game every day at school. They said, "Look, everyone expects you to start with rock because rock feels strong. So, the other guy will probably play paper to beat your rock. Therefore, you should play scissors." Christie's played scissors. Sotheby's played paper. Scissors cuts paper. Christie's won the $18 million contract. What's the lesson? If you are predictable, you can be exploited. If the IRS audited people in a predictable pattern, say, alphabetically, everyone at the end of the alphabet would cheat on their taxes until December. To enforce the law, the IRS must be random. They must mix their moves. In a competitive game, your best defense is often to let the coin decide, so that even you don't know what you're going to do until you do it. If you don't know, your enemy certainly can't know. Now, we need to bring all of this together into a framework you can actually use. We've talked about simultaneous games, like rock, paper, scissors, and psychological traps. But most of life is a sequential game. I move, then you move, then I move. And for this, Nalebuff and Dixit give us rule number 1. If you remember nothing else from this podcast, remember this phrase. Look forward and reason backward. Asterisk asterisk. This is the golden rule of strategy. To make a decision today, you have to look at where that decision will end up 5 steps from now, and then work your way back to the present. The authors use the example of Charlie Brown and Lucy. Every year, Lucy holds the football. Every year, she promises not to pull it away. Every year, Charlie Brown trusts her, runs up, and wham! She pulls it, and he lands flat on his back. Why is Charlie Brown a bad strategist? Because he is looking at the present. He's looking at Lucy's smile. He's listening to her promise. If he used rule number 1, he would look forward to the moment just before he kicks the ball. He would ask, at that moment, what is in Lucy's best interest? Well, Lucy loves humiliation. She gains joy from seeing him fall. So, at the final moment, her incentive is to pull the ball. Since her incentive is to pull the ball, she will pull the ball. Therefore, reasoning backward to the present, Charlie should not run. It sounds simple, but we fail at this every day. We enter business deals assuming the other person will be nice in 3 years. We don't look at their incentives. We don't ask, if this goes wrong, or if this goes right, what will they want to do? You have to draw the game tree. Picture a tree with branches. Each branch is a decision. You have to climb to the very tips of the branches, the final outcomes, and figure out which branch the other person prefers. Then you chop off the branches they won't take. You prune the tree back until you find the only logical path that leads to the present moment. This applies to everything. If you are making an investment in a foreign country, let's call it Fredonia, you have to ask, once I build my factory, and I can't move it, what is the government's incentive? Before you build, they want to woo you with tax breaks. But after you build, you are a hostage. Their incentive flips. Now they can tax you because you can't leave. If you don't look forward and reason backward, you build the factory and get crushed. You have to anticipate the change in power before you sign the check. So, where does this leave us? We started with the carpenter and the general. We've realized that we are all generals, whether we like it or not. We've learned that sometimes we should follow to lead. We've learned that burning our bridges can make us stronger. We've learned that stubbornness is a weapon, but only if used carefully. And we've learned that to win, we have to start at the end and work our way back. The art of strategy isn't about being the smartest person in the room at math. It's about empathy. It's about escaping your own head. It's about realizing that the person across the table, your boss, your spouse, your rival, has their own game tree, their own incentives, and their own fears. If you can see the game through their eyes, you stop guessing. You stop hoping. You start predicting. You stop kicking the football, and maybe, just maybe, you start winning the game. Thanks for listening. Go out there and look forward.